Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. This is the 13th talk in the series on the 4 ways of changing the mind. And with this talk, we enter into the 3rd way of changing the mind, the teachings on karma, cause and effect. In fact, the last 2 teachings, 3 and 4, karma, cause and effect, and suffering, the nature of samsara, they form a pair. They're in some ways different from the first 2. The teachings on the precious human existence and the teachings on impermanence are very approachable. They're very understandable. And probably many of you have heard that the Buddha invited us to please don't just take my teachings on blind faith. Feel free to check them out. Of course, it's a wonderful thing to say, but not everything can be checked out that easily. But these first 2, the precious human existence and impermanence, can in many ways be checked out. And also they resonate. They make sense for us. They're user-friendly. So with the precious human existence, we learn to value our lives, to be very positive, to see it as a wonderful opportunity. I think anyone can relate to that. And as far as impermanence is concerned, once our eyes open more and more to what's happening in the world around us, in our friends, family, in our own lives, then we can appreciate just how true the Buddha's teachings on impermanence are. But now we move into karma and suffering. These are almost impossible to check out, for us at least. And they take us into territory which is deeper, much more complicated, and also much more subtle. Usually when we get a series of teachings like the 6 paramitas or these 4 ways of changing the mind, we start with the easier one, and then step by step things become a little more subtle, more complicated, and it's certainly the case here. But what we need to know is that these teachings on karma and on suffering, they're the very heart of the Buddha's teaching. Many things in Dharma we share with other faiths. We share with common sense. We share with what is called natural Dharma, or with psychology. But you'll find what really singles out Buddhism, what characterizes it, what makes it so much what it is, are these teachings on karma, cause and effect, and on suffering. They're vital. We can't do without them. Moreover, because here we are looking at these 4 ways of changing our minds in the context of preparing ourselves for much deeper practices, in the hope of using this life to go far, to accomplish a lot, and in particular to prepare ourselves for Mahamudra or Dzogchen, very deep teachings, then we need to know that without some understanding of karma and suffering, without a deep-rooted belief in karma and suffering, we will never be able to practice those deep teachings. Those deep teachings work with our mind. And this mind that's aware of karma and aware of suffering, a mind which is opened up in that direction, sensitive in that direction, believes in or knows those things, is the mind which is gaining the qualities that make Mahamudra work. And without it, Mahamudra can't work. No matter how much you just sit and meditate, there's a basic compassion in relation to this suffering. There's a basic vision of one's mind in terms of karma, many lifetimes, that absolutely needs to be there. We need to be crystal clear about this. I mention this for two reasons. One is that some people somehow like a lot of the Buddha's teachings. They like to meditate, they like the mindfulness, they like many things. Makes a lot of sense. But then when it comes to past lives, future lives, reincarnation, karma, they say, oh, just a moment now. I find this hard. Some people even say, I have a very scientific approach and I just can't accept this. Let's not get too much into it, but there is no clash between these Dharma teachings and science. I trained in science. I love science. I try to keep up a little bit with science. And I see that the science of the last 100 years, 150 years, has gone more and more in the direction of the Buddha's teaching, not away from it. And people who say they have a scientific approach, well, I'm sorry, but their science is usually very, very out of date. So that's one reason that it needs to be made clear at this point that for the deeper teachings we do need to believe in karma, past lives and future lives. The second reason that I mention it is that there are one or two writers today, people who have been a little bit known as Buddhists, who question the Buddha's teachings on karma, cause and effect. It's a shame, because those teachings are the very heart of the Buddha's teachings. Some say he was paying lip service to what we would now call the Hindu teachings of his time. Now let's be very clear about that as well. Very clear. In all of our Dharma teachings in Buddhism, the tradition, thousands of years old, practiced by all of our great masters, taught by our great masters today, this denial of karma, cause and effect, is described as one of the worst things you can do. The worst things. It's called the thorn-like view. And the idea is it's like a poisonous thorn that's got into you and is going to infect and get worse and worse. So please don't take those writings too seriously. And I'd like to say something else quite candidly. The day that those one or two writers, and I know some of them, have the qualities of the Karmapa and the Taisattupa and Trungpa Rinpoche and all of those great teachers telling us about karma, cause and effect, the day I see the enlightenment and the brilliance in those one or two writers, I might start listening to them. But otherwise, let's forget them for the moment. Hundreds, thousands of wonderful, great Buddhist teachers have got where they got through the teachings on karma, cause and effect. And we need to go that way too. The way we Buddhists prove to ourselves that karma, cause and effect is very valid and that there are past lives and future lives, there is reincarnation, is through exactly the same methodology as scientists use. You know, scientists look into deep space, deep space, and as far as they're concerned, they're looking at the very beginnings of this universe. They're looking back in time, and they draw their conclusions from what they see. Now, of course, the only real way to find out what happened at the beginning of the universe would be to actually travel through time and go back and observe. We can't do that. So what scientists do is to deduce from the evidence that they have these days. And the same in CERN, where they smash the atoms and they're looking at what happens for 1,000th, a millionth of a second to try and get a clue to see whether their understanding, their theories are correct. It's the same with us. See, the scientists, they can't go down to the actual level of the subatomic particles. And they can't observe for a millionth of a second. They need machines. They need very second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand evidence. But nevertheless, it's good enough for them. And so for us Buddhists, based on everything that we come to understand in such a fine and detailed and perfect analysis of consciousness, our cognitive processes, the human mind, based on everything we see in life around us, in our observation of all the different types of existences and their experiences, then all of this justifies the belief in reincarnation, in past lives, and in future lives. It's a very, very good working model. So having made those one or two points, let's turn our attention to this next topic. Karma, cause and effect. Karma in the sense of a whole picture. Karma is a word that means action. So it means what we do. What we do in terms of what we are causing, what we are putting into place by each action that counts as karma. And then the consequences, the effects of that, sometime in the future, usually in the next life or later lives. There are very few karmas that ripen in this life. So we're looking at a whole package, not at causes as one thing, and then something stops and sometimes later a new thing occurs, an effect. We're looking at the fact that as soon as we've made the action, we've already created the future. We've written the future by what we've done, unless somewhere along the line the process is modified. So it's karma, which means deeds, actions, but we're not just looking at actions now, what we're doing, and their impact on other people, their impact on ourselves. We're looking at actions as causes that have implications and repercussions in the future. We're looking at the whole package. And the way we're looking at that gives us our Buddhist moral compass. It gives us our very definition of morality as Buddhists. Our definition of morality does not come, as it does in many other faiths, from some god or gods. It's not given. Our definition of morality lies in the very nature of actions themselves and their effects in the moment, on other people, on us, and their longer-term effects that come back to the doer through the power of karma. So we look in there at what is helpful, what is positive, what is good. Not because somebody said it's good, but because in its very nature it is doing what we call good. It's helping. It's bringing pleasant, happy circumstances everywhere and for the future. So we call that goodness, virtue, the things we encourage ourselves and others to do. And then when we look at harm, evil, the darker things, we see that by their very nature they are damaging, just now. Not only that, through the power of karma, through what they set into motion, they bring suffering and unpleasantness in the future. So they are non-virtue. They are wrong. They are evil. Not because somebody said they're evil, not because the Buddha said they are evil, but by their very nature. So they're compared to seeds, the seeds of poisonous plants and the seeds of nutritious plants. The power is in the seed itself. It's in the deliciousness of the fruit, or it's in the illness and the poison of the fruit that comes out of those seeds. Now also through the teachings on karma, cause and effect, we have our Buddhist answer to the question, why do things happen? And of course this is a question that humanity's asked itself ever since it really became a thinking animal. As we observe the world around us, we see some people with short lives, some with long lives, some with power, some without it, some with health, some without it, and so on, and so on. Then it's natural that as humans we wonder, why? In some faiths, it's all a plan of the gods or of one god. We are pawns on a chessboard. We are just tiny things in a master plan. We have no choice. In other ways of thinking, then there is just material reality, biology, life, atoms, and it's just one big biological accident, one cosmic situation without a particular divine cause or anything else happening behind the scenes. Many people think like that these days. For Buddhists, there is something going on behind the scenes, but it's not the hand of the divine, it is the power of past karma. So for us, it answers the question, why am I me? Why is my neighbor my neighbor? Why is his life different from mine? How did that come about? It gives us the answers. It gives us very general answers. It will never actually tell us all the details of, yes, in a past life, our neighbor must have done this and done that. There's no nice little Buddhist textbook we can look through and say, yes, he's case number 527, typical. We can't get that precise, but we can understand the general principles of karma that help us to understand why some are richer and some are poorer, why some have so many friends and some are so lonely, why a dog is a dog, and I am a human being. So it tells us, karma, cause and effect, tells us why things happen. It also, because of the very nature of the deeds that cause things to happen, it gives us moral values as Buddhists. And this is where, in fact, Buddhism, how can you say, is different from secular mindfulness and many other things. It's where Buddhism really starts, because it does very definitely have a set of morals. And these morals are based on an understanding that this life is just one part of a long journey, and that we've had many lives before, and we'll have many lives in the future. To practice secular mindfulness, to do psychological work with your emotions, your thoughts, your feelings, that will be very helpful for you, as indeed happens in secular mindfulness, in therapy, and many, many things. Does not need that vision of many lives, does not need a goal of enlightenment, of freedom from suffering. It's a very immediate thing dealing with what we are today and tomorrow. But the real Buddhist path is a path over many lifetimes, and it absolutely needs and depends on that vision of past lives and future lives. So let's, in this first talk, where we've entered the subject, just look at the main principle, the bottom line about karma. The teachings on karma give us the basic idea that what we are in this life is a result of everything we did in past lives. It's not just a result of whatever happened since conception. Akon Rinpoche in his teachings said there are four things that form us, shape us as human beings. One of them, very simple, is just the genetic heritage that comes down through the generation. The second thing is what happens while we're in the mother's womb. Those 9 months of intimate contact, of sharing the blood, the biology of somebody. A third thing is all the things that happened since birth as we grew up and interacted with the world. But the fourth thing is the inheritance from past lives. And that is very powerful. And there we're looking at the bigger picture. So once we've grown up and we start to reach around 20 and become independent, this is often when the power of our past life karma kicks in. It makes us meet the people we meet the circumstances we meet. So what we have in this life is very much the result of what we did in past lives. And then, most importantly, because we can't go back and change the past, what we are doing with this life, with the resources we've inherited through everything that was there in the past, what we're doing with this life is writing the story of our future lives. So it's very important that we make that story of the future a beautiful story, a positive story, and that we never do anything that will make it a painful story. Very, very important. And so that's why this belief in reincarnation is important. We need to see our time here in this life, as Shantideva says, like being a traveller staying in an inn overnight. While you're in the inn, for your overnight stay, of course, your room and the people there, the evening meal, it's all relatively important. You do your best to make it a very nice overnight stay. But if that overnight stay suddenly becomes a total distraction and it stops you from continuing your journey, that could be a big shame. So in this life, we have, as we've had in many past lives, an amazing opportunity for our minds to become strong, pure, clear, wise, kind, loving, all the things we tried to achieve through Dharma. And so karma, action, shows us what to do and also what not to do. The basic guideline is whatever we do which is kind, which is helpful, which is generous and supportive and protective of other beings, and that for ourselves grows the heart of love, deepens the knowledge, the wisdom in the mind. All of those are good karmas. And the results will always be happy results, pleasant results in future lives. This means you'll live a good, long life, a healthy life. You'll have friends. You'll have resources to do what you need to do. You'll be in a place of peace and prosperity, and so on. On the contrary, when we do the things which are innately bad things, harmful things, the things that damage other people's life, their life force, where we use other people, we eat animals, where we exploit other people so that they suffer physically for our physical welfare, when we steal, when we abuse sexually, when we lie, when we cheat, and so on. All of those things that in one way or another damage other beings, and the dark deeds that damage us at the time of doing those things. On top of that, the repercussions in the future are to take us into situations that are unpleasant, where we suffer short life, illness, aggression. We suffer in so many ways. because of those things. Nobody wants to do that. And out of the Buddha's great kindness, great wisdom and compassion, he shares with us the secrets that we can't check out, but that the Buddha, with his pure and perfect mind, could see very vividly, and that with the path, we ourselves will come to see it couldn't be any other way. This secret of how what happens in one life has repercussions in the next life. And as we come to understand more and more, we'll see that it's not quite so simple as it seems, because it's not as though I'm here and I do things and then I'll be reborn and come back just like this. That would be far too easy. That's why the word reincarnation is a bit strange, because nobody comes back as they are in this life. With death, there's such a dispersal, a scattering, chaos. And the next life will be so different, and there won't be the memory of this life. A whole new being will be formed, but somehow. And that's the mystery and the strangeness. What was done in this life will influence that new person. They'll pick up the karma. But anyway, we'll come back to a lot of this in the next teachings. Karma, and then after that, suffering, are such huge topics. We will only be able to grasp the main principles. We won't be able to go into the details. Fortunately, a lot of the detail is available now in books, in many, many sources. So let's try and pick out the essential points so we can really put our finger on the pulse of what the Buddha's teachings on karma, cause and effect really mean. So I look forward to carrying on these talks, and in the meantime, please take good care of yourself. Thank you very, very much.